Undoubtedly, my hobby bench was the thing I missed the most. It served as my sanctuary, a place for soul healing. There wasn't anything wrong with my soul, it's just an interesting way to express a certain level of unhappiness. Somewhere along the line, things fell apart, but I can't pinpoint a specific time because it happened gradually. I'm quite handy around the house, capable of fixing almost anything. I dislike calling repairmen for simple tasks and paying them nearly a whole day's wages for a few hours of subpar work. However, what I can't fix is my marriage. To explain, it's like a fine piece of china. You can glue a broken plate back together, but it will never be quite the same. Once a marriage is broken, it can be repaired, but it can never be fully restored to its original condition. I didn't want a patched-up broken plate. After 18 years of marriage, my wife Tracy decided to explore relationships with other men, at least one that I know of. By the time I found out, it was too late to prevent the breakage. Slow in recognizing relationship issues, I had assumed everything was fine. We married right after high school and had a daughter named Carly right away. Complications meant we couldn't have more children, but we were content. My job as an auto body man paid well, but it offered no real future. I could have opened my own shop, but I never had the desire for business ownership. Things were fine as long as the money was adequate. Tracy spent her evenings taking night classes at the local community college. She was more ambitious than I was, actually much more ambitious. When Carly started school, Tracy began working, which improved our family life with the extra income. With 2 incomes, we managed to scrape together enough to buy a small house in a nice neighborhood. There was never a desire for a bigger or better place. For years, Tracy didn't waste money on frivolous things. She dressed and groomed herself well while watching expenses. My wardrobe expenses were usually limited to jeans and flannel shirts. She always looked put together, while I always looked a bit unkempt with my bushy eyebrows and long hair tied back in a ponytail. I wasn't trying to be a wannabe hippie or biker, I just liked my hair that way. No one teased me, as I had enough build to intimidate them if necessary. The downside to my grooming habits was Tracy's occasional embarrassment when we went out. She never said anything, but I could feel it. As Carly grew, Tracy spent more time at work, becoming an expert in insurance claims. She enjoyed her work and started bringing home more money than me, though she never commented on it. By Carly's high school years, Tracy had evolved into a sophisticated businesswoman, spending more on clothing as her status grew. Frequent trips to the beauty salon and nights at the gym transformed her into an attractive woman, while I remained a grungy, hairy embarrassment. The next step in the progression of our marriage was inevitable. Over the years, my relationship with Carly grew stronger. I spent more time with her than with her mother, and we developed a bond. Tracy was either at work or working at home, and family time decreased as quickly as Tracy's career advanced. Our personal time together also dwindled. She was always too tired, and I sensed that I was no longer the man she once dreamed of spending her life with. I grew up in a public housing project. My mother, a single parent, raised my brother Robert and me by working as a waitress. It was tough for her, and we didn't make it any easier, constantly getting into trouble. That was the nature of life in the projects. Many of my character traits carried over into my marriage. I was rash and quick-tempered, which landed me in juvenile hall a few too many times. Tracy was aware of this, but since we married, I had kept it under control and had actually become a little more placid. As Tracy and I drifted apart, I sought solace in my basement hobby shop, a dank little hole. Distressed about my failing marriage, I didn't know what to do. Despite trying the usual things like flowers, gifts, weekly expensive dinners, and good wine, nothing worked. In despair, I retreated into my little haven at every opportunity. Carly remained the bright spot in my life, but I felt I was letting her down. I viewed myself as a defective father and husband. Were these feelings self-induced, or did Tracy impose them on me? She loved me, she would never do that. To divert my mind from my shortcomings, I spent hours creating electronic gadgets, simple things you could buy anywhere. My first project, a fake video surveillance camera, was fun to make, although it served no real purpose. As I gained experience, my projects became more elaborate, yet I never advanced beyond being a mere tinkerer. On weekends, Carly and I frequented yard sales and flea markets. She acquired retro clothes while I collected old electronic and remote control toys. Tracy stayed at home. 2 months ago, I suspected Tracy was cheating. It didn't take me long to confirm it. She was visiting Todd Wick, a coworker, at his apartment every Tuesday and Thursday for 2-hour lunches. Tracy hadn't made much effort to conceal the relationship. I didn't know if she felt complacent or just didn't care. The plate was broken, irreparable. At this point, I decided that something had to be done. I spent the whole day preparing for my departure. Carly was starting college in 3 weeks, and everything was paid up for the first 2 semesters. Although I'd miss her, I felt it was time to cut the apron strings. I took half of the savings account, unconcerned about other financial matters. I just needed enough to get away and start over. Filing for divorce seemed overly complicated and futile, in my view. Instead, I had my attorney create a power of attorney for Tracy to sell the house. Papers were also prepared to sue Todd Wick and Continental Memorial Insurance, although my expectations were low due to their shared workplace. Despite this, the lawyer was willing to try anything for a potential percentage. I instructed him to proceed. The majority of the evening was spent working on my modified alarm keychain, which was no longer just a keychain but now boasted a surprisingly loud alarm for its size. To achieve this, I upgraded the battery to 9 volts for increased volume and duration. I configured it for remote activation and ensured it couldn't be turned off. The device, encased in a 3-inch PVC plastic with 20 drilled holes, had a small antenna wire protruding. After completion, I affixed 2 PVC caps on each end and painted it flat black with barbecue paint, though the reason for the paint choice was unclear. If everything went as planned, the only way to stop it would be to drop it into water. Attempts to make it watertight muted the sound, so I left it as is. Tracy had been in bed for a while, making it easy for me to slip the gadget into her purse lining through a small hole in one of the side pockets. I estimated it would take at least 5 minutes for someone to locate and extract it from the bottom of the purse, which was sufficient for my purpose of provoking irritation before my departure. After carefully checking my work, I spent the next few hours loading desired items into my truck, picking up my body shop tools, and making a final check that afternoon. Clothing retrieval could wait until morning. With everything ready after Tracy left for work, I spent the night on the sofa. My wife, dressed for work, inquired about my morning plans. I explained that I got tied up with a project the previous night and was catching a few hours of sleep. She asked if I would eat anything, and I replied that I would just have coffee and an English muffin before leaving. She reminded me to rinse my dishes as she pulled out of the driveway. I couldn't help but notice how good she looked. Was I going to miss her? At least for a while. I grabbed some trash bags and headed for the bedroom, intending to collect the clothing I needed or wanted. Suddenly, my daughter Carly confronted me, questioning my actions. I responded by asking why she wasn't at school, and she revealed that she had already met all her curriculum requirements. She insisted that I answer her question. I placed the bags on the floor and looked at Carly, offering her coffee as we walked into the kitchen. She managed a small laugh and asked if I had figured out that Mom was cheating on me. I acted cool and asked, "Figured what out?" Carly revealed that she found out about 2 months ago and expressed frustration that I hadn't done anything sooner. I explained that I had only recently discovered the situation and was planning to leave. Carly pressed me for details and asked if I had talked to Mom. I admitted that I hadn't and questioned if she had. Carly explained that she confronted Mom about 2 months ago, but Mom provided no satisfactory explanation. It seemed like Mom wanted to get caught. We sat quietly for a few moments, contemplating the situation. I revealed that I didn't know where I would be going, while Carly shared her plans for college. I assured her that I had taken care of everything I could ahead of time. Carly asked about my boat and belongings. I mentioned my friend Felix from the project and how he would help me with a few things, including taking care of my boat. As I put the cups in the sink, I realized I never made that English muffin. Carly asked about the boat again, and when she realized I was giving it to Felix, she smiled. In that moment, I couldn't help but feel a deep appreciation for my daughter. 20 minutes later, I was hooking the boat up to the truck. When I got the boat, I was hoping it would be something the family could enjoy together. Unfortunately, it was not Tracy's cup of tea. She hated the boat and the water. Carly and I went by ourselves a few times, but it wasn't the same. After that, the boat just sat by the garage. I wouldn't miss it. I had a few firearms and a deer rifle that my dad gave me before he moved to Florida. Felix would get more use out of them than I would, even though he didn't hunt. I piled all of my snap-on and power tools into the back of the boat. Mr. Handyman had retired. Felix was barely awake when I got to his place. He had 2 mixed-breed girls living with him, but it quickly became evident that they were not morning people. Felix got us a couple of early morning beers, and the girls went back to bed. When I was 15, Felix and I broke into a golf course maintenance shed. The sprinkler system for all 18 holes was old and had been done in copper. The maintenance shed had been full of copper fittings necessary to maintain the system. I decided that a lot of money could be made by reselling the copper, and Felix was more than eager to join me. Needless to say, we got caught, or at least I did. Felix got away. The cops knew that there were 2 of us, but I always insisted that it was only me. I got 2 years probation for being dumb, but made a lifelong friend because I kept my mouth shut. Felix was as white as I was, but insisted on talking as if he were from the ghetto instead of the projects. There wasn't much difference, but Felix had to get by in a different environment than I did. He adapted to his world, and I couldn't fault him for that. Felix questioned me about dragging the boat around and asked if we were going fishing. I explained that it was a present for my best buddy, and he jokingly claimed to be my only friend. I then told Felix that I was leaving town for a while and needed him to take care of my belongings. I slid the boat and trailer title across the kitchen table, and Felix laughed, thinking I was joking. However, I assured him it was a trade. I needed him to do something for me in return. Felix, eager to help, asked if I wanted someone passed away, but I clarified that I just wanted the person to spend some time in the emergency room or recovery ward. I emphasized not to kill him, only to hurt him. Felix's smile grew, and I explained that I wanted this to happen every 6 weeks for 6 months or until the person left town. Curious about the reason, Felix asked if the person took Tracy from me. He immediately regretted his words, apologized, and fetched 2 more beers from the fridge. I handed Felix a 3x5 card with the name, address, and license number of Todd Wickham and asked him to wait a couple of weeks before taking any action. He looked at the card and nodded. The power tools and weapons were a bonus he hadn't expected. He took them inside the house while I unhooked the boat. We talked for a few more minutes and then parted ways. I could trust Felix. A year ago, I would have said that there were 2 people I trusted. Now there was just Felix. It was Tuesday. Tracy and Todd walked out of the company building and got into his Lexus at 11 o'clock on the dot. Since I knew where they were going, I had no trouble following them to Todd's apartment. There was nothing affectionate going on. They were just acting like a married couple. I gave them 15 minutes to get settled in and then hit the button on the remote control. Nothing occurred. The darn thing didn't function. What the heck did I do wrong? I exited the truck and approached the apartment building, pressing the button once more, still no response. While contemplating my next move, I opted to deflate Todd's tires in desperation. I might as well be productive. I only targeted the 2 tires on the side away from the building. In a last-ditch effort, I walked right up to the side of the building and tried again. It finally worked. I was outside of the apartment building, and the noise was loud and clear. The sound inside had to be extremely loud. It blared for about a second, paused for 2 seconds, and then repeated. Everyone in the apartment complex was now being entertained by my little gadget. I grinned as I walked back to the truck. Halfway down the block, I could still hear the beeping. Things were progressing better than anticipated. My lawyer was having the lawsuit papers delivered to Todd and the company at 2 o'clock. I would be gone by then. Carly was waiting for me when I got home. She handed me a card with her college address and her cell phone number, which I already had. She had a few extra things for me to take that I had missed and even packed me a lunch so that I wouldn't have to stop until I got out of the state. She actually explained that when she gave it to me, and we both had a good laugh and a hug. I left the power of attorney and my wedding ring on the kitchen table. Carly stated that she would be more than happy to explain things to her mother. My body tools were in the back of the truck under the bed cover, and my personal stuff was jammed behind the seat in the cab. As I pulled away from the house for the last time, my cell phone rang. It was Tracy. I turned the phone off. It would have been interesting to hear what she had to say, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. Interstate 81 South was the best escape route. I didn't stop until I hit Chattanooga. It was a sleazy motel, but there was a bar next door. Big mistake. I drank way too much and then discovered that while I was sleeping it off, one or more of the local boys had borrowed all of my body shop tools. The back of the truck was picked clean, but they didn't touch anything in the cab. I don't know if that was because of integrity or maybe they just couldn't carry anymore. I showered, shaved, and put on fresh clothes. After a much-needed breakfast at the local Waffle House, I hit the road for Nashville. I was kicking myself for being so damn dumb and trying to figure out what to do next. Without tools, I wasn't even going to try and get a body shop job. I settled in at one of the Crystals in the area and started going through the help wanted ads. Most of the jobs were commission sales or minimum wage jobs, and the ones that fell into normal categories I wasn't qualified for until I hit a small 3-line ad, wanted auto damage appraiser. Must have body shop experience. Conrad Insurance Company. I turned my cell phone on, called the listed number, and got a name, address, and an appointment in 1 hour. I deleted the 5 calls that came from Tracy. I punched the address into the GPS and headed right over. I always like to be early. I had never gone on a job interview before and realized that I was not dressed for one. It was too late now. What they see is what they get. There were 3 other guys there when I arrived. They were all well-dressed and looking good, each of them holding a folder, which I assumed was a resume. Each one entered the manager's office, stayed 5 minutes, and left. They didn't look happy. I was feeling pretty good because I didn't think I could do worse than they did. The guy behind the desk was dressed well, but the clothes didn't fit the man. He was hard, with cracked skin and faded tats sticking out around different parts of his clothes. His hands were the things I noticed most. They were calloused and gnarly, just like mine. This guy wasn't an executive, he was a metal beater wearing people clothes. He noticed me smiling and sort of smiled back. It didn't take him long to read over the interview form that I had filled out in the lobby. I believe I left half of the spaces empty, not as a smart-ass move, I simply lacked the information to fill them. Hemingway. Daniel Hemingway, I clarified, adding that no, I was not related to the famous author. He seemed relieved and expressed that he wouldn't want intellectuals hanging around the office. Grady Burgess, the man I was talking to, introduced himself and inquired about my presence. I made it clear that I wouldn't try to con him, having witnessed others being excused for attempting to give him any nonsense. I explained that I got drunk the night before in Chattanooga and all my shop gear was stolen from my truck while I slept it off. I mentioned that it's hard to get a shop job without the necessary gear, so this seemed like a good alternative. Grady seemed to understand, but sensed there might be more to the story. I admitted that my judgment was clouded due to finding out about my wife cheating on me after 18 years of marriage. Grady asked about my wife's current location, and I replied that she was in Pennsylvania. He called Marcy, a woman in her mid-40s, to bring us 2 coffees. She set down 2 plain white ceramic cups without cream or sugar. Grady, with a loud voice, instructed her to cancel the rest of the appointments, indicating that they had found what they were looking for. Marcy gave Grady a scowl and then gave me a little wink. I felt a bit sheepish, but Grady was smiling at my embarrassment. We chatted for about 2 hours, and then he carefully explained to me what the job entailed, as well as the pay and benefits. The only downside to the whole deal was the image requirements. 80% of my job was going to involve contact with customers, so image was paramount. That meant a haircut and a complete change in grooming habits. I was expected to get a new wardrobe and a shoe shine kit. He emphasized that Marcy would personally help me with everything that needed to be done. I was expected to be in Atlanta by Monday morning for a full week of training. Comrade Insurance was an independent company but worked as a subcontractor for several larger national auto insurers. Everything had to be done to specific standards. The company paid all the expenses related to the training, but the clothes and grooming were coming out of my pocket. Marcy seemed to enjoy the rest of the week more than I did. I was a little project for her. I insisted on going to a barber shop rather than a hairdresser, but she made all the rest of the decisions. Not only did I get a haircut, but I also got my eyebrows and ears trimmed and my nose hairs pruned. Marcy informed the barber that I would be back every 10 days for the same treatment. My working clothes were pretty generic, khaki pants and white shirts. She even found a jacket that went with the pants. I also got 2 pairs of black steel-toed dress shoes with a dozen pairs of black socks. She had found a small studio apartment for me and helped me get it set up. Friday morning, I got my Tennessee driver's license, and that afternoon Marcy gave me the keys to my company car and a laptop computer. Before leaving me at the apartment that evening, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed me on the cheek. She expressed admiration, saying that if Grady wasn't so jealous, she'd have to jump my bones. While flattered, the thought of her suggestion made me shiver a little. It was time to give Carly a call. I spoke with Carly and shared that I had been hired for a desk job doing appraisals out in the field. I explained that it was the first place I applied to, and I seemed to be in the right place at the right time. Carly asked about home, and I mentioned that I was fine, but Mom was a wreck. Carly was surprised, expecting Mom to be happy to see me gone. I noted that it seemed like Mom had a plan, but I messed it up somehow. Carly shared that Mom spent the first day sitting at the kitchen table, chanting and being unresponsive when questioned. I apologized for messing up Mom's plans, and Carly speculated that Mom was anticipating some type of confrontation but hadn't counted on my sudden departure. We both agreed it was unexpected, and I apologized again. Changing the subject, I asked Carly about her plans. She planned to leave for school as soon as Mom settled down a little, hoping to pick up a few summer session classes. I shared that I was leaving for Atlanta the next morning and promised to call her when I got back. Carly expressed that she was glad things were working out for me and believed Mom would break out of her slump soon. The training classes in Atlanta were a snap. It was mostly about putting the right information in the right block. The hardest part was overcoming my weak computer skills. I had no trouble getting a few of the young female trainees to tutor me, but I found it difficult to resist their charms. They seemed disappointed in my reserve. The next 2 years flew by. Grady was quite pleased with my job performance and was generous with raises and bonuses. I talked with Carly regularly. She was doing well in all her classes and with her social life. It was nice to see that she was dating, but as a father, I was a little anxious about the whole scene. She laughed at my concern. I never heard from Tracy. There didn't appear to be any attempt on her part to contact me. I wasn't hiding, so if she had wanted to find me, it wouldn't have been a problem. She sold the house and prepaid Carly's tuition with the proceeds, then she left town. Tracy called Carly every few weeks, but their relationship never returned to what it was before the incident. I had to give Tracy credit for trying. Carly had no idea where Tracy had relocated to and never asked. Tracy never filed for divorce. I could hold out for as long as she could. My social life was another matter. I never thought of myself as a ladies' man, but I discovered that a new persona came along with my upgraded appearance and marital freedom. I was technically still married, but under the circumstances, I didn't feel that way. Nashville was full of young women looking for companionship. I always made sure they knew that I was married and not looking for any type of serious relationship. Surprisingly, that turned out to be a big plus with most of them, including a few who were married themselves. I was careful not to date any of the married ones more than once and never took them back to my apartment. It didn't matter too much with the single ones, as long as they knew I wasn't husband material. Grady had hired 2 more guys to do what I did. I got to train and supervise them. There was plenty of work to go around, but I got the feeling that something was in the wind. Grady approached me, expressing that we needed to talk. Despite his seriousness, what bothered me more were the words he used, the dreaded phrase wives often use when springing bad news on unsuspecting husbands. Grady chuckled at my groan. He assured me not to get too excited, mentioning it wasn't all that bad. We both laughed, but then he dropped the bomb. He said, "Daniel, I hate to say it, but you have outgrown the job." I was puzzled and asked, "What the hell does that mean?" Grady explained that I could do better than my current position and, although he had no complaints, he believed I should be thinking about moving on. Feeling a bit defensive, I asked if he was firing me, but he adamantly denied it. Instead, he clarified that he was trying to encourage me to move forward. Marcy came in with 2 cups of coffee, unasked. She leaned over and whispered in my ear, loud enough for Grady to hear, that he was afraid I might steal her away. She assured me not to worry and added that if he let me go, she would go with me. Grady groaned as Marcy left the office, and the idea of her giggling lingered, sending a shiver down my spine. Grady then informed me about a job interview he had set up for me in Houston on Friday. American Consolidated Claims needed someone to run their national operation, specifically the appraisal section, and Grady had already spoken to them about me. I questioned why they wouldn't hire young, qualified college graduates, and Grady explained they had tried that 3 times without success. Curious about his motive, I asked, "What's in it for you?" "I don't understand." He revealed that in about 4 years, he and Marcy were going to be moving to Gulf Shores, and ACC had agreed to buy his business when he was ready to sell. I understood that he wasn't doing this out of the goodness of his heart, but was using me as part of a trade. He admitted, "Exactly. See, I always said you were smart." We both enjoyed another laugh at his devious but transparent attempt to take advantage of me. Thursday night, I was on my way to Houston. I didn't want to relocate, but everything Grady said made sense. I could have flown to Houston, but I decided to drive instead. American Consolidated had 3 floors in an enormous office building. They were expecting me, and I was not the least bit nervous. I knew I was capable of doing the job, and I was ready and willing to handle anyone who dared to question my qualifications. Knowing that their MBA employees had flubbed the job previously gave me confidence. The first 2 interviews went great. During the third one of the young middle managers started to ask about my formal business training but was immediately shut down by his boss. I smiled at the support but was upset at the same time. I spent the last hour with the Human Resources Director discussing salary and benefits as if my acceptance was a foregone conclusion. To be honest, at that point, it was. It would be difficult not to take this job. It was lunchtime, and my host was anxious to show off the company cafeteria. The floor we were on was as big as a basketball court. Field offices lined the perimeter, and cubicles dotted most of the center. My host expressed optimism about me enjoying working there. I reciprocated, stating that I believed American Consolidated Claims looked like a top-notch organization. I mentioned the potential occasional confusion with 2 department heads named Hemingway and clarified that I had no relatives in Houston. Unexpectedly, she brought up a distant relative named Tracy, catching me off guard. While walking, I noticed Tracy across the room. Despite her different hairstyle, she looked radiant, talking with a small group of employees. I couldn't help but stare at her as if hypnotized, and I accidentally stumbled into a mail cart, causing a small disturbance. Tracy noticed me, looking a bit surprised, and I took advantage of her confusion to quickly leave the floor. When asked if something was wrong, I explained that I wasn't paying attention and was admiring the layout of the operation. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. As we reached the cafeteria entrance, I thanked Miss Thurgood for her help and expressed my regrets about declining the offer. It was an unexpected move, and she stood with her mouth open as I quietly exited the floor and the building. I acknowledged that it was a great job and recognized that I might regret turning it down at some point. However, at that moment, being close to Tracy on a regular basis would cause more pain than I was willing to endure. I wondered why Tracy hadn't filed for divorce yet and hoped she would take her maiden name back when she finally did. Grady was going to be pissed. I'll handle that when I get home. 12 hours later, I was back home. Interestingly enough, Grady was more apologetic than angry. He expressed regret, saying, "Sorry, Daniel. I had no idea that your ex was working at ACC." I sat across from his desk and smiled as Marcy sat down, bringing 2 cups of coffee. I reassured Grady, stating that there was no way he could have known and it wasn't anybody's fault. I admitted, if I had any guts, I would have just taken the job and faced her. But as you can see, that didn't happen. Grady responded, "That doesn't make you less of a man, Daniel. There is no way you could come out a winner under those circumstances. I probably would have done the same thing. I am sorry if I screwed up your deal with them," I said. Grady laughed a little, setting down his cup. "No problem, Daniel. They still want it, and the deal is still on." Things continued as they were for the next few years. Carly graduated from college and married a nice fellow from Cleveland. I managed to attend the wedding in time to give her away, but did not stay. Tracy was there, looking beautiful. It was extremely difficult to avoid her, but I did. Carly was disappointed that I didn't stay for the entire day, but she said that she understood and was glad that I showed up. I was happy that Tracy got to see her only daughter get married. I started filling my spare time by taking college classes. It made more sense than going to bars and picking up women. Most of the other night school students were older, and a few of the ladies were able and willing to fill in for the missing bar girls. Grady was happy to foot the bill for the classes. Eventually, it came time for Grady to retire, and all the terms of the sale had been finalized. Since I had expressed my reluctance to stay with ACC, Grady arranged an interview for me with a Chicago firm. Despite my reservations about going there, Grady explained that the employment package was fabulous, which seemed unusual given the competitive job market. Upon arriving at the Universal Amalgamated Insurance Building, I was taken to the 18th floor and saw the name on the door, EMT Peak. To my surprise, the executive from ACC who had defended my qualifications during my interview there was present. The first 30 minutes went extremely well, but then things turned sour. Mr. Peak expressed disappointment over my sudden departure after our talk in Houston and mentioned being somewhat understanding after learning the circumstances. I apologized for running off and explained that I wasn't ready to face the challenges that would have come with the job. Mr. Peak then questioned whether I had figured out a way to handle difficult situations better. He mentioned setting up another interview for me and asked a seemingly unrelated question about a small glass dome on Tracy Hemingway's desk at ACC. His question about Tracy worried me, and I wondered how she was related to this interview. He inquired about the purpose of the black object inside the dome, revealing Tracy's relocation to Chicago. Mr. Peak expressed the value he placed on Tracy and his intention to keep her on the team, urging me to compliment her. Feeling trapped, I explained that the black device was a small item I made for my wife before we separated, unsure why she kept it. When Mr. Peak asked about its purpose, I decided to end the interview, stating that he would need to get that information from Tracy. I stood up, unnerving Mr. Peak, who seemed desperate and began talking faster as he steered me toward Tracy's office. On her door was just her name, no title or position description. As I walked in, Peak continued talking, and I noticed Tracy at her desk, older but more beautiful than I remembered. Over the years, I had focused on the bad things she had done, and my image of her had deteriorated as my resentment grew. However, the fact that I still thought about her often indicated that, deep down, I still loved her. I hated what she had done, but I never stopped loving her. As this turmoil filled my mind, I realized that I was standing there, shaking my head slowly from side to side. It felt like I was trying to deceive myself. Her voice pulled me out of my reverie. "Daniel, nobody told me that you were coming. What are you doing here?" She started to get up, but I motioned for her to stay seated. I sat across from her, not knowing how to start the conversation. "You look good, Daniel. You look even better than when I saw you in Houston." This was not the discussion I had anticipated. How was I supposed to react to that? There was no way I was going to compliment her on her hair or dress. It was a game I wasn't willing to play. "Mr. Peake asked me here today so that I could explain what the doodad, as he calls it, is on your desk." Her hand instinctively went toward the glass dome, but then stopped. "That's crap, Daniel, and we both know it. He offered you a job again. He was disappointed when you turned him down in Houston." I didn't respond. I just sat there, unsure of where this conversation was going to lead. "I wanted to talk to you, but you were gone before I could catch you." "Why would you want to do that?" I asked. At the time, I was still hoping that I could explain things to you. Now I know there was nothing to explain. It was all pretty much out in the open. I found myself regretting coming to see her. I pondered how to leave without seeming like a total fool, but then wondered why I should care. She asked if I ever wanted an explanation, and there was something in her look that invited me to continue. She inquired why I kept the little alarm. I explained that it reminded me of how foolish I had been, knowing that one mistake could ruin a lifetime. When I mentioned that she had only slept with him once, she clarified that wasn't what she meant. I asked Tracy before I left if she could provide me with a reason that wouldn't sound like a tired old cliché. She responded that she probably couldn't, reminding me that she had given an explanation to Carly. She admitted that was before it was too late. Curious, I asked what that meant. She explained that at the time Carly confronted her, nothing had happened yet, and she just sat and looked at Carly. The conversation was not going the way I wanted it to. Somehow, I realized I was going to have to listen to her tell me about what happened and why. I didn't want to know, and if she insisted on explaining, I would demand the short version. I didn't want all the details. She went on to reveal that up until about 6 weeks before I left, all she and Todd did was spend time together. They had lunch and saw a few movies. Todd knew what she was trying to do and agreed to help her. None of this was his fault. Confused, I asked what she was talking about. She clarified, "It was a plan, Daniel. It was a plan to make you jealous. Well, not exactly to make you jealous, but to get you to pay attention." Perplexed, I asked again what she was talking about. She explained that she was buying me flowers and things, going out to eat regularly, doing everything she thought I wanted her to do. I was telling her it was all her fault, which wasn't what she was looking for. I sat without speaking. She mentioned that it was never my fault and that she hadn't realized it until after I left. She said she finally understood what she had done and how wrong she was. Tracy was babbling, so I questioned her, asking what she was really talking about. She decided to start at the beginning, mentioning when Todd started at the company. She immediately noticed him, well-dressed, well-groomed, and well-mannered, everything that I was not. I asked if that was when she decided she wanted him. She clarified that it was when she decided she wanted me to be like him. It was always me, not him. She wanted me to look like him and act like him, just like I do now. I questioned, "Okay, then what happened?" She explained that she knew it was bad in a marriage for one spouse to try to change the other. A good marriage depended on each partner accepting the other as they were. If she tried to change me, the marriage might fall apart, but if I decided to change myself, it would be okay. I remarked, "Okay, that's the first thing you've said that makes sense." She continued, sharing that when she started to openly spend time with Todd, it was so that I would notice. Either I would confront her about it or figure it out for myself and take action. I questioned, "Take action? What does that mean?" She clarified that she was hoping I would get a haircut, start dressing better, and be a little more attentive. It never worked, and she never knew why. She acknowledged that Carly figured it out and confronted her. Carly didn't know why, but she knew what Tracy was doing. At that point, Todd and she still hadn't crossed any lines, so she didn't feel too guilty, but she was a little annoyed that Carly questioned her. She admitted she was wrong. She confessed to messing up with her husband and her daughter. I asked if she had been intimate with him, and she admitted yes. She said it wasn't Todd's fault, it was hers. She knew it took two people, and he could have stopped it, but he didn't. I sat silently, not knowing what to say, having no more questions at the moment. About 2 weeks after Carly confronted her, Todd and she were alone at his apartment, drinking wine, which she acknowledged wasn't a good idea. She was feeling miserable that I hadn't figured it out yet. One thing led to another, and they ended up in bed. Drunken intimacy isn't ideal, but it happened. They avoided each other for 2 weeks after that. She was a real mess at home, blaming what happened on me, thinking I could have stopped it if I cared. She had been with another man because she believed her husband didn't care about her. It was foolish, but she didn't end it. She became depressed and talked to Todd, and a week later, they started seeing each other regularly. By the next week, I finally caught them, but by then, it was too late. She expressed regret for being slow to figure things out, thinking everything would have been fine if she had realized it sooner. I was being a bit sarcastic, and she remarked that it didn't suit me. It was time to go. I sat quietly for a moment, trying to come up with something clever to say, but nothing materialized. What I did to Todd was cruel and unnecessary, I said. She questioned why it was cruel, emphasizing that Todd never did anything to deserve it. He never tried to seduce her or disrespect me in any way. She expressed that Todd never attempted to take her away or break up our marriage, he only did what she had asked him to do. She acknowledged that he made a few bad judgment calls, but now Todd has to walk with a cane for the rest of his life. In her perspective, she said, "It's not fair, Daniel." I responded, "Try walking a mile in my shoes before making such a statement." I mentioned that my response was as clever as I could manage on short notice. As I stood up, I noticed tears welling up in her eyes. As I walked out the door, I heard an audible sob. 8 hours later, I was back in Nashville. Needless to say, Grady was disappointed when I gave him the news, but he did have a very nice severance package for me. I called Carly and shared the details of the conversation with her mother. I suggested that she make an effort to contact her, but she didn't seem too responsive. A week later, I left Tennessee with a new pickup and a comfortable bankroll. I ended up in Yuba City. Merrill Coaut had decided to sell his auto body shop and move to Hawaii. I knew the business and was confident that I could run the operation and still send Merrill and his wife a nice little retirement check every month. It was a clean operation just outside of town and included a small 2-bedroom cottage in the back. It was all that I needed. 10 men came with the business, I kept 6 and let the slackers go. I figured I could pick up some new ones as I went along. I was going to burn all those damn suits that I had accumulated, but I ended up giving them to the Salvation Army. They had a job interview program set up, and the suits would come in handy for somebody who needed them. My mustache grew back with vigor. It seemed happy to be released from the constraints it had been forced to live with over the past few years. In no time, my hair was long enough to tie back. Look out, Willie Nelson, here comes Daniel Hemingway. The business flourished, and I felt like my old self. Things were going great until the week before Christmas. When I arrived at work that morning, there was a small wrapped package on my desk. I looked at it for a moment and called my foreman in. "What the hell is this?" "Don't know, boss. A lady came in early this morning and left it there. She said she'd be back at lunchtime." I sat for a long time without touching it. I knew what was in the damn box, there was no doubt in my mind. What I didn't know was what I was going to do after I opened it. I got a hot cup of black coffee and stared at the box for a few more minutes before starting to unwrap it. For some strange reason, I was being careful not to tear the paper. My foreman came back in and saw me holding the black plastic object with about 20 little holes in it. "What the hell is that, boss?" I set it down and leaned back in my chair. "I'll tell you after lunch." Story 2. My wife and I were married for 4 years, and our relationship years and marriage were just perfect. Each time I remember how my wife broke my trust, it still hurts me because I remember how much we went through and overcame to get to the level we were. Yet she forgot about everything and destroyed our happy home and lives. The first time I met my wife, the stars aligned in the right order for me that day, and something pushed me to go grocery shopping in the middle of the weekly day off from work, unlike my usual weekend shopping. While I was in the store, taking the things I needed, I noticed an average height, light-skinned girl walking down the row I was shopping on, and she smiled at me. I returned the smile out of shyness, but focused more on what I needed and left her in that row. A few minutes later, I was done shopping, but before I took the things to the cashier to pay for them, I noticed she was already driving out. I didn't think much about her. About 2 minutes' drive from the store, I saw her standing on the road with the hood of her car open. I didn't need a psychic to tell me that she was having car issues. Out of kindness, I pulled over and asked if I could help. Thankfully, she was having a minor battery issue, and it was definitely something I could help with. When we were done fixing her car, we talked a bit, and she willingly gave me her number without me asking, and we said our goodbyes. 1 week passed, and I had forgotten about her and her number. It wasn't until the day I was looking for an old friend's contact that I saw her name saved. I remembered her instantly and felt terrible for not calling her after days. Without wasting time, I called her and introduced myself. Then we fixed a date. She was a bit uptight at first, but after much persuasion and my begging her to let me make things right, she agreed to the date. Our first date wasn't at a fancy restaurant or an eatery like the regular dates. She insisted that if we were meeting, it would have to be at a popular park we both knew, and I agreed. Later that evening, we met and talked about ourselves, and we ended up having more evening picnics and park dates after that. When we met, we were both freshly out of college and lived at our parents' houses. I was fortunate to get retained at an organization I interned at, and the pay was not really good, but it was okay to keep things going until I got a good job. My wife, on the other hand, worked 3 jobs simultaneously because her mom was sick, and she needed all the money she could get to buy medication and take care of things at the house. Her father worked too, but he was inconsistent and spent all his money on alcohol. He didn't contribute to the house, so the responsibility fell on my wife and her younger brother. Eventually, we got married because I didn't think I could live without her. We loved each other so much, and we were always together, even when she was mourning. I was there for her emotionally, physically, and otherwise. I supported her as usual, and we continued our lives together after her mom passed. I always treated her like my special woman and gifted her whenever I could afford to. In fact, 2 months after her mother's burial, I took her on a 1-week vacation so she could take her mind off everything, and it worked. Luckily for us, shortly after we got married, she got employed at one of her dream organizations, and her job was great, 3 times better than what I earned, and I was so happy for her. I felt like God was rewarding her for all her hard work when her mother was alive, but sadly, the first 1.5 years of her doing her new job didn't come with changes for us. I was still the one taking care of all the bills at home, and that was because she had so much debt to settle. After she settled most of the debts she racked up in the past years, we began to see changes. All that while, she neither bought herself clothes nor anything new. She mainly wore clothes from thrift stores and fairly used shoes and bags. When she got that month's salary, the first thing she did was get herself a new phone and some clothes. She also settled all her credit card debts, which was such a relief for us, since I was more of a tech person. The first thing she did when she came home that day was to give me her new phone to help set it up, and I was glad to do that. She needed me to transfer all of her photos and messages from her old phone to her new phone, and that was how I stumbled on her iCloud account. Somehow, one of the names she saved on her phone piqued my interest. It was the name she used to call me when we started dating, but as we grew older together, she stopped calling me that. The name had sent her messages through an app one didn't even know about, and they had been communicating frequently, even more than we did. I read some of their messages, and I was forced to read them all to satisfy my curiosity. To my greatest shock, I discovered that my wife was having an affair with one of her coworkers, and they had been dating for the past 8 months. I also found that the evenings she told me she was working overtime at the office were clearly a lie. They had been going on fancy dates and even took pictures of themselves when they were at it. The most shocking part was when I found out that my wife and her lover were planning for her to divorce me so she could move in with him, while her lover's wife and kids could return to his parents' house. I was very disappointed and betrayed, and I could not believe she had been playing me the whole time, even though she knew I genuinely loved her. The funny thing was I was planning to get her an expensive gift that week to appreciate and encourage her to work harder. But she ruined everything. I was so mad that I forwarded the messages between them to my phone as evidence. Then I got her HR's email address and anonymously sent everything to them. I knew very well that their company was against coworkers dating, and I knew they would get fired. Well, it worked. She came home the next day in tears, claiming that her company decided to cut down on staff and she was fired. To her surprise, instead of consoling her like she expected, I laughed and told her I was responsible for everything. But she didn't understand me. When I showed her their conversation from my phone, she started crying again and asked me to forgive her. She said that she did it because I was too dull and nice. She also said it was because I did everything she wanted without complaint, and she wanted something different and someone who would give her a tough time. I was devastated, angry, and in tears. I kicked her out of my house, and shortly after that, we divorced. I didn't want anything to do with her or her family anymore, and if she didn't leave when I asked her to, maybe I would have hit her, and it would put me in a more terrible state before she left. I reminded her that her late mother would be so disappointed in her, and hearing that made her cry even more. I also blocked her on all the social media platforms we shared, and I warned her brother not to come close to my house or he'd be arrested. Finally, after staying at that house for 4 months, I moved to a different location because I could not handle people constantly asking me about her. I also heard she went to confront her lover, thinking the wife would divorce him so she could move in with him, but he embarrassed her, and his wife even hit her most times. I think she played me from the beginning. I hate to admit that I was used, but I wasted a greater part of my life and finances for nothing. I hope she is miserable wherever she is. I am slowly moving on, but I know it will take a while, and I'm in no rush. This story is full of pain and betrayal. Your wife deceived you and led a double life, which led to the destruction of your marriage. Your reaction to the discovered facts was understandable, but it's important to seek support to cope with the emotional stress and start the healing process.